Hey, welcome into Vertical Pursuit, episode 90. Mike Barrett and Pastor Mike Tatlock. There's been a lot happen.
A lot has happened.
Since our last, and our last one wasn't that long ago,
No.
but you are off sabbatical now. Mm-hmm. And in the time that we have recorded, we did another baptism at my house, which was
awesome.
really cool.
That was awesome.
And then we did Cowboy Church. Which was really cool. That was the Canby Rodeo, and something that, man, I give you credit on that one, because that was something that you came up with, and then we happened to know the guys that were open to having a church service, kind of just a casual breakfast with a bunch of rodeo folk who kind of run the circuit, and then a lot of volunteers, and we had a really good turnout. I think better than we thought. We had a little music, and then I came out and talked for a second, opened us in prayer, and then I introduced you, and you had a pretty good sermon. So there's a lot of cool things happening.
Yeah, that was, in fact, I didn't even tell you yet, but I got a card yesterday, a thank you card from the Canby Rodeo Committee. They were amazing, so shout out to them. But just saying thanking us for Cowboy Church, and said, hey, let's do it again. So we're definitely in to be able to do that. And,
and then I'm already talking to a couple. I mean, Dree who helped out with that, and some of the people from the rodeo performance that night. I know a lot of the people at St. Paul, and they were there, and I was telling them about it, and they said, "Wow!" So Dree and I are already thinking about all the area kind of rodeos in the summer, because we're in kind of big rodeo country up here, and it's got a lot of good potential.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, we just took a risk, and it was a God thing that they opened the door and said, do you guys want to work? Okay, we'll do it. And Dree and Jesse did a great job getting all the volunteers to serve breakfast. I mean, that creates an atmosphere, and it was just fun. So many of us, you and David came down, did music, and just so many people that came to make it happen. It felt great. It just felt good. The feedback was great, and who knows? Maybe next year we'll do a little rodeo tour. I don't know.
Rodeo is such a breath of fresh air, and even for people, because I talked to some people at the rodeo who I knew, and they're like, "This is our first time," and they're not necessarily, yes, there's a lot of patriotism, and then there's a lot of, every rodeo that I've been to, they open in a really big invocation and prayer.
Yeah, amazing too.
And as the public address announcer said, who's really good at Canby, he said, when the night was starting, he goes, if you're new to rodeo, he goes, there's two things that we absolutely do unapologetically. Mm-hmm. We salute our flag, and we talk to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And he does a great prayer. Justin McKee, who is the public address announcer for St. Paul. These are guys that travel the country. Justin, I know, was a pastor at one point. Mm. So there's something that's intrinsically inside the rodeo community, which honors tradition and holds it sacred and honors the flag. And then there's always a great prayer, and you watch everybody remove the hats and bow their heads, and it's just refreshing in a time of, especially right now, which I'm going to talk about a little bit.
It is refreshing. We sat there Tuesday night, which was the heat wave night, and I'll never forget. We're sitting in the grandstand, and there's something about that prayer. And I know they do it at St. Paul, and like you said, some of these guys are have ministry background, and the prayer is, I've always felt really sincere, and it's just kind of refreshing to be there. And you look around, and like I was sitting there, and there were some ladies behind us, and I'm watching. I'm like, okay, the Canby Rodeo also is part of the Canby Fair, and so you bring there's a wide variety of people that come and hang out. And so I was noticing some ladies behind us that probably were ready to drink a lot and whatever. But then when it came to the prayer time, these ladies behind, I could tell they were just really captivated. And he finishes with an amen. And this lady next to, I mean, I don't want to judge people, but I think she's had a hard life. You could tell probably used drugs, because drugs affect your appearance. So you can kind of go like, hey, that looks like meth, And I love that ended up, we had a great time together that night, and ended up kind of chumming with them and having fun. And God just was like, I think God's going to do something. But I could tell her respond to the prayer. I heard her behind me respond to the prayer. And I went, whoa, she really was impacted by that. And, anyways, that was really cool.
Yeah. And it's St. Paul with Justin. He's so good at it. And such a good there's a talent in being a rodeo public address guy that's maybe different from other sports. And I've always been in that world and paid attention to that. And usually I go out, St. Paul usually has 5 days or 5 performances, I think. And I've gone out there to a few, and his prayers are always different, and they're long, and they're unapologetic, and they're just nitty gritty. And I look around, and I know, and I've seen people there, former neighbors or friends of ours who are not churchgoers.
Right.
I don't know that they're believers or not, but I watch when everybody's so respectful during the prayer time. And I think it's because the atmosphere is not only condones it, but kind of celebrates it. Yeah. So people who go out there know that's just kind of part of it, which is really cool to watch. And even the cynical, which some of the people, like you said, there's, at rodeos, there's a lot of drinking, and there can be some wild nature, as conservative as it is.
Right.
But even just like at our service, the one that there's a bullfighter there.
Oh yeah.
And some people who are part of the rodeo, and just to hear them and how important this is to them, and how much kind of the rodeo life and the circuit breeds, maybe searching a little bit and an acceptance of, and maybe that's more because it's traditional and conservative, but it's a special feeling.
Yeah.
For sure.
I just think for me, what was so cool about it was getting to meet new people in that world. I have a lot of respect for those that are like bullfighters, and man, like watching what they do, and the bull riders, and all the athletes, what they do, it's just remarkable. It's just it's a great sport. It's a great culture. It's fun, but part of that culture has a history and faith. And so, and I'll be honest with you, I see that sometimes with, in the NBA, that there's a lot of families and players who grew up with grandmothers and aunties that have a rich, deep faith history in their culture. And so sometimes you see the roots of those faith things kind of emerge and come up, and it's really cool to see that. And you see that in facets with the rodeo culture, and the people there are just hard workers. They're great people. The community feels good. It's just good people.
And last year Nick and I were doing some video work for the St. Paul Rodeo, and we had kind of a full access because we were shooting. So we were back behind the chutes prior to the bull riding starting. And where we were right in the trenches, and you could see everything. And the bull riders are assigned a chute number. And so they're all suited up, protected, helmets on. And then I was watching, and we shot some video of these guys and took some stills as well. And this is 15, 20 minutes before their bull ride, which if it's lucky, it's 8 seconds. So we were talking about a blink of an eye. Every one of those guys was on their knees in prayer. And I was watching this, and we were shooting them. And some of it was, maybe getting their thoughts together, but there was obvious prayer going on. And I remember it was really kind of a special thing. But again, it's just kind of part of that whole thing. I also... there's things that come along in your life that you maybe weren't prepared for, and you think you would be, but I dropped my daughter at college.
Yeah.
And there was something that reminded me of kind of why we're doing this podcast and why we started it, and what Vertical Pursuit is kind of all about, in terms of the target, which we've kind of apologetically said is a lot for lost men who don't really have... There are more tools now. I would say for a long time there hasn't been. Now there's more podcasts and more areas men can go to. But one thing struck me so my daughter's at Boise State, and we drive over there, and I don't know what to expect. I know it's emotional, and I know that, when you're sending them off to the first day of school, and a lot of your friends are likely doing the same thing, because most people are friends with people your age or have kids their age. Is kind of how it works. So you see the posts on social media and whatnot, and you saw it's an emotional day, sending the kid off to school the first time. So these are all phases and chapters. The chapter I underestimated was this college thing.
Yeah.
So there was an emotional time as she left home when we left in the car, and she said goodbye to her brother, my son. And that was tough. I walked outside for that one. But then we left, and then you're not thinking about it because there's excitement, and you get there and it's move-in day. Mm-hmm. And so it's just chaos. But they handled it really, really well. You pull up, and I have a Sprinter van, and I had it full of practically everything she owns, which is a whole nother story. But I didn't fight it. I just said, okay. But you just pull into a spot, and then there's these volunteer college kids who have these huge rolling bins, and basically they unloaded the van in 5 minutes, not even that. And this stuff was in her dorm room in 5 minutes. It was the easiest, because I just didn't know how that would be. I mean, how long you got to walk, because most dorms you can't pull right up to the dorm, and this was certainly that case. But then, then there's the day of chaos and putting things together from IKEA and everything, and you see all the dads doing that, and where her room is, it's a pod. So you walk down a hall and there's a door, and then there's 7 rooms in the pod. And she had met a couple of the girls online and really liked them. And I'm meeting some of the parents, but we're all doing our own thing. So as the day went, then on Friday was a big thing at the football stadium, where you go out and all the parents form this big letter B and they take pictures. And it was a celebration. The marching band was there. Football coach talked. Really, really cool. And then I think that is kind of planned to be the goodbye day, but most people hung around until the Saturday morning, like we did. So we go back over there to say our goodbyes, and that's very emotional. But I'm looking around, and when I was there, both Friday evening and Saturday, or Friday afternoon, there's no dads there. It's all the moms. And I said I could overhear, and then my daughter said, yeah, the dads wouldn't even come in. And she said one of the dads just left and just drove off. And one of the dads is out there under a tree, and one of them went for a walk by the river, and one of them is walking by himself downtown, crying their eyes out.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny to me how the mothers have been in group chats.
Oh, yeah.
And these groups on Facebook for months, knowing what's coming.
Yeah. Where
the men don't have that support group.
Man, we're so screwed on this one.
Oh my gosh.
We got nothing.
We had nothing. And so I'm watching these dads deal with this alone when they didn't really, we all knew it was coming, and I did too. Even if you don't know it's one of those things you see coming, but you don't know how to prepare for. But it was interesting to see the men were just kind of, you're kind of on your own, dude.
Yep.
And then you watch the different guys, and I'm not the kind to run off, and maybe I would have been in the past, but I was able to face the emotion of it and hug my daughter tight and cry with her a little bit, and wasn't horrible, but a little bit. But then I looked around at the other guys, and they just were gone.
Yeah. And
just ran off alone.
Oh yeah.
And to isolate and to handle it by themselves. And so when we talk about both, the groups that we're in, be it a Wednesday night or a breakfast group or whatever we're in with guys, the whole reason is to break that down.
Yeah.
And to get rid of that. And I didn't expect this. And I was sitting there that day going through this, but at the same time thinking of all of this stuff we're trying to do and thinking, here it is right in front of me, a massive illustration of the very thing that I think is not healthy for men.
No.
But it is traditionally, and that doesn't mean it's right, the way that men kind of deal with emotion.
I know it's because I was telling you, I knew you had dropped Gabby off, and we were talking about it ahead of time. And I was remembering when I dropped my daughter off and dropped her off at college, and got in the room, and you're there and you're excited because they're excited and they're nervous, so you're a little nervous too, and all that stuff's normal. And then I got home and just lost it.
Yeah.
It was like I didn't feel, for me, I had to give myself that permission to do that. And I go, oh my gosh, like what is that we can't? And of course, I'm texting her like, I miss you. And telling her like, oh yeah, I lost it. Mom's telling her, actually, Dad's sitting here losing it, and I think it's so good for them to know that we did respond that way.
Yeah.
It's good for them to see us show that, not to where, cause I don't know. Let me ask you this. Why why do we as men, and that I think that's just this story, because you might be listening out going, I've been there. I know, you're sitting there, is bringing back your memories.
And if you haven't been there and it's coming,
and you're like,
yourself.
Oh, here it comes. And then some guys, you're like, hey, I can't relate to this because but we all have this piece of us of like, why is that we as men are stuck in that? And I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like,
stuck in isolating an emotion, or
stuck, first of all, going, why can't I just express this? And two, if I do, I have to do it isolated. And so, like, for me, it's sometimes it's a twofold. It's one, not feeling permission to feel it to start with.
Right.
And then number two is, well, if I do, I'm going to do it in a corner or under a tree. The guys that you brought up, I'm going to do it away from everybody. I can't let them see me, do this. So it's permission and it's proximity that's not there with other people.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably, it's nothing to get angry at men about. No. It's just built into us, and the big boys don't cry, and all these things that we were taught, and all these things that are kind of traditional roles and the acceptance of a role. And you do see guys, especially, we talked, I don't know, a dozen episodes ago about our friend Isaac, and who had the accident, and then to watch him now after coming through something that was pretty close to, it's life-altering anyway, but potentially really life-altering. Now coming out of that, just at the drop of a dime, doesn't care, shows you the emotion. He says, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm just going to let it roar. And he does in front of you, and it's freeing to watch. And I look at guys around him and they're envious of it. So I don't know, to answer your question, why men can't get over that, other than in our culture, and probably it isn't this way all over the world. Although I don't know what's nature and what's nurture in this. That's what I can't figure out. And and it's like when I'm holding my daughter, as she's like me, so I could sense she was doing a pretty good job of holding it. And I'm trying to fight it. And then I'm like, why am I fighting it?
Yeah.
But I fought it. But then when I got home, as you talked about, and it starts all over again, I went out in the garage to my workbench then I can then I can release it.
Yep.
And really by myself.
Yep.
Looking over my shoulder to see if anybody's watching.
Exactly.
Have a good emotional cry about it, which I did several times.
You're right.
I really did. But I wanted to make sure nobody was home.
Exactly.
And I don't understand that.
I know.
I don't know the answer to that. But I do think the chapter closing, and this wasn't your question, wasn't the why, but I was trying to, which is what I always do, I was trying to put into words what this is all about. And I know that I'll face the same thing someday at her wedding. And I've talked to guys who've compared it to that. Another chapter closing and giving your daughter away. And that's probably even a bigger one. You've done that too. I haven't done that yet, but you have. But I kind of, the college thing there, and while you're standing there, sending them off on their own, you're fighting the instinct of being the protector, provider, supporter, comforter. You're still going to be those things, but you're standing there, and you're having to fight every instinct you have to want to bring them back home.
Yes.
And it's the right thing to do. This is coming. This is part of life, and you've prepared them as a father for this day to push them in the water and make them swim. But you just really never thought it would happen as much as you prepared for it.
Your success.
Yes.
Because you're successful. Everything you've done was for these moments. You prepared them. You're launching them. This is good parenting.
Yeah.
And good parenting is causing grief. And it's the life season that's causing the grief.
Yes.
But the good parenting is part of what does that chapter look like now? And you're grieving the turning of the page between one to the next, and it looks different. And I think that's, for me, it's a bigger question that we're talking about here than just dropping our kids off at college or the wedding days. It's us as men. So here's what I unpacked for me. Why do I not express the things that I feel? So if we just zoom out and make it a bigger thing, and I go, I think it's because I don't want to be a burden to people.
Yes.
And I feel like if I show emotion. That's okay. I show emotion. That's not what I'm talking about. I feel like I got to be strong around people so that they can be strong. And again, I'm saying this is right. I'm just saying this is what goes through my head. If I'm weak in front of them, then I don't want to be a burden to them. I don't want my weakness.
Yes.
Now, vulnerability is good, and I don't know how to be weak or vulnerable. And like those two, it's like two sides of a coin. I don't want to be so weak I'm a burden. That's what goes through my head. But I also want to be vulnerable, so that's intimacy, that's connecting, that's sharing. They want that. They want to see our vulnerability. They want to see that we're real and not just stoic and that whole thing. But for me, it's like I don't want to be a burden, and yet how do I show and express my vulnerability? And that's the exercise that I go through.
No, that makes good sense, especially the burden part. Yeah, don't. I'm good. Don't come over here. I'm fine. I'm good. And you don't want to have that role because you don't feel like that's your role, as silly as that is. And some of this stuff, even in the midst of it, you're telling yourself, why are you being this way? But you're fighting an urge. You're fighting an instinct. You're fighting a role that you've built. And I think a lot of guys feel that way. And and one thing that has really flipped the light on for me in that, as much as I think, and I've got lots of great friendships, but the Wednesday night group that we've talked a lot about with the 40 guys or so that come in there, you see those walls break down. You see them start to break down. You see guys who come in once in a while. And I have other friends who have come once or so and then don't think they deserve that and don't want to burden other people with their crap. Yep. So they go, that's not for me. I'm going to go ahead and stuff this and run off under a tree. I'd rather not have to share this because I don't want to burden other people with it.
Exactly.
And I don't deserve it.
Oh.
I hear that a lot.
Oh, totally.
And I know I'm not trying to switch the subject directly on that, but I feel like that's all part of the same thread in terms of how we feel we're wired and then how we respond to it. And having the self-awareness and maybe the freedom. And this is where I think faith comes into play because I don't think I was like that until I had a stronger faith. It took that development. And I don't know. And I'd ask you, why that connection? Why do you, and there's the whole joke about like, if you're in church and you watch like worship and the guy who really is getting into worship has his hands in his pockets, which is me, by the way, and maybe starts to sway back and forth a little bit or does. And where you see women, primarily are much more willing to be emotional in public, be it whatever, faith, whatever. The guys are more reserved and you can kind of see them looking around and, some guys aren't, but there is I don't understand that. But why is in terms of faith, and I would say the stronger my faith became, the more apt I was to have a better self-awareness about where my emotion is and what my role is. What is that all about?
True. I don't know. I mean, I think that the faith piece there, part of it's cultural landscape of what we as men grew up with, right? And so it's funny, I'll travel to different cultures and I will see how manhood, masculinity, is expressed differently. There are some common threads. First time I went to Africa in 2005, we get over there and dudes hold hands and walk down the street. And they told us, they say it's not homophobia. It's none of that. It's like whatever. But it is this idea that that's how men over there can express themselves to each other, men, affectionately, and it's nothing sexual, it's nothing wrong or whatever. It's just cultural. And so they said, hey, don't be surprised if you're walking and some guy might just come up and hold your hand. And sure enough, it did. I'd walk into a village or a community. Next thing you know, some random dude is holding my hand walking down the street. It's the most awkward thing because of my context. It's not awkward for him. It's awkward for me because I'm like, whoa. And now, like, I remember the switch of being able to show affection to guys now way better here. Bro hugs, bring it in, telling each other, you and I tell each other, love you, man. And like, I don't remember that as a kid though. Like, that's changed.
I didn't even hear that from my dad.
Right.
I knew he did.
Yeah.
Totally. But he didn't say it.
No. But now, man, we hug, we say we love you. Man, in my 20s, that never happened.
No.
Never happened.
And I've told you this story. I've got a friend and we had them over for dinner. This was like 8 years ago for the first time, or 10 years ago at least. And when they came in, we gave them both a hug. And he told me 8 years later, he remembers that because they'd never been hugged like by friends.
Totally.
And I'm like, really?
Yeah. And it's powerful. And then, the other day you started holding my hand and I was good with that. And
at the rodeo.
We came in swinging hands.
And, man.
But that's like, but that's a funny just commentary on how like we just, it evolves in different ways culturally. And so where does faith come into that? You see like old, ancient cultures had ways of showing affection, and you realize even how Jesus came and the way that he showed affection. And a lot of that was culturally, but a lot of that was because of who he was, demonstrating. He's like, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so Jesus had a clear mandate that when he wanted to reveal himself, he was also revealing the Father. And so when people came close to Jesus, his goal was that they would feel this is what it's like in a relationship with the Heavenly Father. Jesus was the manifested presence of the Father on earth. And so when he would hug you, you were like, Jesus is showing us what it means to be hugged by our Father in heaven, who, we can disconnect that. Like God's up there and we say that angry man up in the sky and all that kind of stuff. And Jesus was like, let me show you what he's like. In the way that he spoke, the way that he was affectionate and loving, we know those things. So I think for us as men, I have to get to a place where I just don't want to be a burden to people.
Yep.
And I have to get really honest about that at times because it's okay to say that because I think some people don't have that self-awareness and it's like, you need a little bit of not being a burden to people. I understand that. But like, even when you come home and you have a hard day at work or something is hard at work, and as a husband, like, do I really want to download that and just dump on my wife or, anyone else? I'm like, no, I'm just going to tuck it inside. I don't want to be a burden and I don't want to overwhelm them. They've got, and you say things that they got stuff they're dealing with. And, but at the same time, intimacy, whether it's between a dude and his brother or a man and his wife, intimacy is birthed through vulnerability. And I think we have to give each other permission to say, the Bible says, this is where the faith piece, carry one another's burdens. So that's the faith piece, which is actually an invitation to say, I'm supposed to carry your burden. In fact, you're in some ways, healthy ways, not in narcissistic ways, you are meant to be a burden to me. I'm supposed to carry your burden without you. And I think part of it's identity, where there's a difference between someone carrying my burden and I am a burden. Those are two different things.
There's pride in there too.
Oh God. Well, we haven't talked about pride.
Because pride is, I have a really close friend who he's going through some stuff at work, and he'll tell me that like, when he's driving home after work, he'll go and stop in a parking lot and turn on worship music. And he said, I don't want to bring this gross, evil crap home. So I go and I sit there and cry for 15, 20 minutes, and then I go home. So then he's the greatest guy in the world about asking me how I'm doing. And he wants to hear every detail. And then I'll flip it around to him and he goes, I'm good. I go, dude, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'll be fine. And I'm like, so you're asking me to be vulnerable, but you're not vulnerable back.
Yeah.
And he's not. And I've said a couple times, you've got some pride issues there. Tell me. And after enough, flopping around, I'll get some stuff out of him. And it's not a bad thing. It's just, and again, I've got my own pride issues, but it's an interesting thing. I've tried to figure out ways to crack that a little bit to where, sometimes people are the way they are, and it takes a lot of work to get them out of their shell. And he is one of the most wonderful guys in the world, but I cannot get him on a day. And then later I'll hear about something and I'll say, when did that happen? Like really big thing. And he's like, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm like, we talk every day. Why didn't you tell me this? I don't want to burden you.
Exactly.
I know it's the same thing. That's why I thought about it when you were talking. He's exhibit A in that. I'm like, And so you go back from the friends who tells, who when he's calling you, you have to check your watch to say, okay, do I have an hour to pick up this phone call? Because I'm going to hear everything about his life. And he never asked me how I'm doing. I have some of those. And then I have this other one where he wants my vulnerability, but wants to offer none. And I've said to him, I feel awkward offering mine if you're not going to offer yours. So you have to kind of make an agreement, I feel like, with some friends. If we're going to go down this road, and hopefully you do naturally, but you got to offer it up, man. You can't ask for it without giving it.
Right. Wow. Do you think, too, it's fear of rejection, fear of people going to see me as weakness, which could be pride? There's that pride piece. I don't want people to see me as weak, or I don't want to. Do you think somebody it's also, man, if I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm letting down all the guards.
Yeah.
And which then can be fear of, well, what are they going to think of me now? Are they going to think less of me? Because I do know men, we want respect. I get that. But you can gain respect by being vulnerable, not lose respect. But I also wonder sometimes, like, well, I'm afraid of what they'll think of me if I'm honest and real and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, that's for sure part of it. It's a funny, I don't know, man. We're a funny Rubik's Cube, and you got to try to figure it out. And I, the reason I brought up my daughter and the college thing is it was just one of those things that is coming, and then you learn a lot about yourself. And then if you're at all paying attention to those around you, again, I was hit with, what's wrong with us as men? Come on.
Yeah.
And I didn't handle it perfectly, but at least I was, I didn't run off under a tree. And I'm not saying that was wrong for those guys to do that. It just showed me we got a long ways to go as men.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a cultural thing, like you said, and it's going to be a hard thing to crack. But at the same time, I get home and I'm praying about my daughter being gone and feeling the sadness. And then as school is starting around the country, we hear, I hate to change the subject so harshly here, but then we hear about this another school shooting.
Yeah.
And this, for whatever reason, this trans individual, which there's been a lot of those, and there needs to be a discussion about that. Hopefully nationally there will be, goes in and we're seeing an emboldened attack or attempts at attacks on kids, which, that happens. And then you read all the reactions, you're sad, you're heartbroken. Then you read the reactions, and I read a couple that were really interesting and were pretty mainstream, talking about how this was a demonic possessed person. Yeah. And I read that. And then I saw some people fire back and go, what does that even mean? And then this person explained what he meant by some of the things this person had written and some of the
voices they were hearing.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I, maybe in my past 25, 30 years ago, before I really had a good understanding and really had been in the word or been talking to people, I wouldn't have understood what that meant. And so I want you to talk a little about that, but then I also want to, and I don't want to, there's been this mockery since this happened at a Catholic school, and there's been a talk of, even from the White House, J.D. Vance had some quotes on the prayer, and we're praying for you. And then we've had this mocking of it by Gavin Newsom, who came out and mocked prayer. And he mocked basically Caroline Leavitt, who's the White House press secretary, and she was talking and defending the power and importance of prayer for people of faith. And then Newsom comes out and basically mocks it and says, oh yeah, that's great. These kids were literally praying as they were shot. So what are you trying to say? And then I know the mayor or the governor of Minnesota did the same thing and came out backing kind of this sneering a little bit and mocking of people who were praying about what had just happened. And it almost feels like there's this, I don't understand why, I guess, and to go back to J.D. Vance, he came back and his quote was, it was shocking to see some of these people attack the idea of prayer in response to a tragedy, which they were doing. And and JD, I thought, had a good quote about it. He said, literally, no one thinks prayer is a substitute for action. Mm-hmm. We pray because our hearts are broken and we believe that God is listening. That was his quote back to some of these people who were mocking Christians for praying through a tragedy.
Yeah.
But you've heard that in back rooms, but now it's out front.
Yeah.
And I think because of this open mockery by people of power like Newsom, there's been the Minneapolis mayor, I was wrong, it was Jacob Fry, who dismissed the thoughts and prayers, which so did Jen Psaki, the old White House press secretary, the previous. And that's where the battle between Levitt and her kind of came in. But it was just so brazen and weird. But in the past 7 years in our country, and this was a quote given by Bishop Robert Barron, who pushed back on Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, who he dismissed the thoughts and prayers. And then Bishop Barron came out and said that in the past 7 years has been a 700% increase in violent acts against Christians and Christian churches. And worldwide, and you know this because you've traveled a lot of the world, Christianity is by far the most persecuted religion. And some people were, talking about, well, was this an anti-Catholic? Is this anti-Catholic violence? They're asking the question. And then he made the comparison. If somebody attacked a synagogue with people praying, would anybody doubt and anybody say that that's not anti-Semitic? And if someone shot up a mosque while the devout were praying, would anyone doubt that it was an anti-Islamic attack? And so why are people hesitating to say that this is not a violent act against Christianity once again? And we're seeing, and I know that you have to deal with this as a pastor now. I mean, I know that every church has to have security.
Yep.
And you have to have plans of what to do and cameras and locked doors. And we're seeing this. And as you're seeing politicians kind of like outwardly sneer and mock, they're fueling this among people who are maybe have some mental health issues, which they do. And then they're radicalizing them essentially by fueling this in the national media, which we haven't seen before. Yeah. And then you talk about a 700% increase in the last 7 years, and you wonder why.
Yeah. Well, I think that at the end of the day, I hit a couple of those things. Number one, you said earlier, we were talking about, is this demonic? Yes. Like no one should even question if it's demonic. And what do we mean by that? Well, first of all, the Bible says that we don't wrestle with flesh and blood. We wrestle with principalities and spiritual beings behind the scenes. So and then it goes on to say that's why our weapons are not of this world. And because we know there are weapons of the world. The weapons of the world we see, but behind the scenes, we see that there is demonic influence that is in partnership with the human person, the autonomy of the person, to do things. The Bible even says, Paul was telling Timothy that there are those who've been held captive by Satan to do his will. It's literally what Paul tells Timothy. And so what that means is that we all have a volition, and some of our volition is impacted by all kinds of things. For instance, if somebody's intoxicated by alcohol, you're going to do something so you're controlled, right? You're under a controlled substance.
And in many cases, you're going to blame the alcohol.
Exactly. It's 100%. I had one of the where I've come face to face with violent crime.
That's really good. I had not thought of that.
And because what happens is that if you can blame the something else, we don't actually take responsibility for our own depravity. That's the problem. At the end of the day, we have an issue which is called sin, human depravity. Every human being is broken. We are bent towards sin. And there's an old quote that says, what you feed grows and what you starve dies. So if you feed sin through anger, resentment, if you stir people, they will go do those things. And Satan is the mastermind behind all this to influence and shape people's emotions and cause strife and cause conflict. And we become pawns in his evil game of destruction. And so we partner with that spirit. We partner with those evil spirits, that influence. And so what's happening, though, is you blame everything but taking responsibility for our own depravity. It's easier to blame the alcohol. It's easier to blame the guns. It's easier to blame the blah, 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 blah. Instead of going, we are a sinful, broken humanity, and in our sinfulness, we make agreements with demonic influence behind the scenes, spiritually, in the unseen world. And when those agreements happen, it can play out in the most evil, violent crimes. So yes, everything you see that's violent has a spiritual dimension to it. It also has a very human sin dimension to it. And I remember being in Rwanda in 2005 after the genocide with 1 million people slaughtered by machetes. And I'm sitting there going, this is insane. I'm literally watching in 2005. We're there not that long after the genocide happened. By long, I mean just within a couple decades, and less than that actually. And the just watching, I remember going to churches. They took us to some memorial sites where I'm walking over skeleton bodies that they left so people wouldn't forget what happened. And so I remember my good friend, Pastor Charles, I said, hey, what is this? I'm sitting there with him. He was a refugee. He lost his family in the genocide. And I'm watching videos that they have recorded. They were showing us. And I'm watching a guy take a machete and chop his neighbor. And I'm literally watching this with my own eyes. I'm hearing the stories. There were churches that people ran and flocked to thinking there was going to be safety. And they came in, and I saw altars. They left them, altars in a church with the tablecloth and the altar soaked in blood, where the men raped women and then brutally, killed them. And I'm being pretty graphic to make a point, is that exists. And I asked him, I said, Pastor Charles, what caused this? His first words, without missing a heartbeat, demonic. He goes, there is human depravity, and then there's a level in which human depravity takes a next jump into such evil, and that's when someone is being influenced. And I mean, I had a mentor of mine whose son showed up at his door and shot him and killed him, and he was high on meth, and the son came to the house the next day totally unaware of that. My point is that if you think of somebody under the influence, any of us can be under the influence of a demonic lie. And so what you're seeing right now in our culture is this polarization where they are grooming, I'll use that word, they're grooming them. And there's a word in the Bible that says Satan is the accuser, and he accuses the brethren, he accuses Christians before God. What Satan does every day is he goes before God and says, this person shouldn't be forgiven because X, Y, and Z. And Satan loves to take all of our mistakes and use it as evidence to bring a conviction on us, to which God goes, no, they're forgiven for those of us who are saved in Christ as believers. But nonetheless, Satan, that word accuse in the Greek is categoris. It's where we get the word category. And so what Satan is a master at doing is creating categories where people are in opposition to each other. And so I'm just going to use the genocide in Rwanda as a case test for us to look at and say, I said, how did this end up here? How did you guys go as two harmonious tribes, the Hutu and the Tutsi? How did you guys go where you married, you intermarried, there was harmony, no strife? Like, how did you get to the point where one day 1 million people are slaughtered? What happened was gradually, I won't give you the whole history of this, but basically lie after lie after lie came in and created the categories, created them to turn on each other, created them to not trust each other. And it took time, but eventually you got to the point where one group thought, out of self-preservation, we need to eliminate the other group. Well, you see this fear. This is what Satan, the definition of terrorism is using and leveraging fear to use that to control people, Manchurian candidates, if you will, where all of a sudden fear becomes a trigger and it's used to take somebody out. And of course, people can be doing that where they are demon possessed. That is possible. Where people are 100% controlled and they are just a vessel that a demonic influence has taken control of to carry out an evil plan. There's times where that happens. Most of the time there's been such a seduction of twisting of thinking in the mind that someone then actually believes the lies under that influence and carries out something, and it's justified in their head for a number of different reasons. But that's what you see even happening right now is getting people to hate the other group so much so and grooming them with fear and hate that they will then carry out things like this. So anyways, we can go more in a lot of details on the politics behind it. When you see a shooting like this and the response is prayers, and then somebody comes out and says, "Oh, how insincere. We want to see action." And they of course they're going to politicize these tragedies. And so you see that layer too.
And it's weird how it's been just Psaki, who was the press secretary, and then it was Newsom, and then why it's just so weird to me. You mentioned the politics that are at play behind this, but in terms of the categories, and be it that Trump is polarizing, and that no matter what, I mean, he could do they're still going to hate him, but it's almost like it's unlocked a level of depravity that I'm not sure people ever have thought possible before. Yeah. And then you kind of sense how the people with influence can use that to radicalize those who are easy to get. And that's what it seems like. And I'm just looking at it from it's weird when you see the line drawn down the middle in political party, and now you see some of the leaders, and for as many problems as Newsom has and what he's done for California and done to California, it's like he still has he's a rising star in that party, and you see him coming out and in a sneering, mocking way, going after people who are praying about this, and then you think, what's that? What are the repercussions of those comments going to have? And are you aware of your responsibility with words and what that could potentially do to essentially radicalize another one?
Well, and that's exactly it. It's pretty gross, and I would call it leadership malpractice, where in those moments of tragedy that you use it to lobby for your thing, and that is a pretty sadistic. And you could probably say, sure, I've seen it on both sides, because somebody will be quick to say, well, what about this? I'm like,
sure.
Okay, well,
sure.
Point of it being though is, in a moment of tragedy, and you particularly at a school. Now, we haven't talked about this yet. You brought it up. We haven't gone deep down, but I could tell you right now, there is an increased hostility towards Christian churches. There is. The statistics are showing it. And the conversations that we have, we do consulting. We actually, as a church, do consulting with a at-risk or a threat assessment corporation that we have deep connections with. One of the best that's in the country, that actually came from someone attending our church and started their own threat assessment consulting business for churches and businesses. So we have high level training, high level intel from sources that are watching the world scene. They're doing their research, the studies. The numbers are showing that churches are facing what they call acts of violence. Now, I want to clarify that, because when I say to people, the numbers are showing increased acts of violence against churches, they define in the study, acts of violence against churches, including even things like vandalism. So someone like, well, that's not a violent crime. Well, just, for just clarity's sake, we are seeing an increase in that, and churches are having to step up that. But I'll tell you where we're at. So as a church, we feel called to be there for a broken world, a sinful world with the gospel. We're called to be there for people who are hurting, marginalized. We are seeing a significant increase in mental health. And people will ask me oftentimes, we'll see mental health things where I go, nope, that is a demon. That is not mental health.
What makes you see that?
So
and say
for me, it's hard to discern at times. It really is, to be honest. At times you're like, what am I dealing with right now? Am I dealing with mental health? Am I dealing with bipolar, schizophrenia? What am I really actually dealing with? Or is this a demonic manifestation? And sometimes I can only tell you it's a sense that you get, and discernment over time. Most often I can tell that it has to do with, it's a direct attack on Jesus. And I'm going, okay, this is not just someone who's angry at the church. There's statements that are made when I'm talking with them. I can tell if I bring up Jesus or something like that, there's an increase of reaction. And there's just a number of things where I can go, this is a demonic attack. There's a person here who has allowed their life to be opened up. I will also say this, that drugs and alcohol are gateways, can be gateways. I'm not saying every person that's drunk is demon possessed. Let's just be clear about that. But I will say that the words pharmacia used in the Bible, that's the Greek word talking about drugs, can allow someone through under the influence of drugs to lose their volition. Now we know that. Somebody's inebriated. It's like, okay, basically they're under the influence of a drug. Well, drugs can cause a person to open up their mind to the influence of demons. So this shooter, I don't know them personally, but the stuff that they were talking about and the conversations in their heads, the pictures that I saw in their journal, this person, I guarantee you, was influenced demonically. Whether they were possessed, influenced, there's a lot of those words. Sometimes pastors would use the word demonized, whatever. Point of it being there was an influence demonically, and that voice, that demonic voice they were listening to, shaped and influenced their worldview, their perspective, and then therefore their actions. You can't just say, well, blame it on the devil. But in many cases, like I said, it's when our sin in us partners with the demonic influence, it leads to these outcomes. But this person, no doubt in my mind, whether they had drugs in their life, whether it was mental health issues, a combination of all of that, opens people up to demonic influence. And you see it, you can see it manifest at times, and you're like, whoa, this is demonic. But, as believers, we're called to come alongside and help set people free. I mean, that is what we're called to do. We're not called to fear the enemy, but we are called to stand guard, to be wise, to be discerning. And, being at a church, there's a number of times we'll see a situation where we're having to talk and as a team and discern, what are we dealing with here? If it's mental health, let's figure out how to get somebody some help. Let's get them to a clinic. Let's get them to figure out what meds they might need to help them with that chemical imbalance or whatever it might be, trauma in their life that they're trying to deal with, whatever. We want to help as many people as we can. And at the same time, we have to create a safe place. We have to protect people. And what we have found is oftentimes people with mental health that do acts of violence, particularly if they're not dealing with reality, then they are a harm and a risk to others, not even aware of it. They can be so in a different reality that you can't rationalize with it, you can't reason it. You have to deal with it because you got to protect people, and there's measures in which you go to do that. But
so putting the that's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. But let me ask you a really general question. So looking at the numbers, and I talked about them a minute ago, and this isn't really a surprise to anybody. Why is the world mad at Christians?
I think that when Jesus was with his disciples, I've been all sabbatical, I've been in John chapter 15 about abiding, but in the context of that, Jesus says, right around John 14, 15, 16, Jesus says, the world's going to hate you because they hated me. And what the Bible also says is that there is an antichrist spirit. Now, when most people when they hear the Antichrist, they think Left Behind movies, and there's going to be this world figure, and which I believe that. That's not what I'm talking about. The Bible says there is a Antichrist spirit which is already at work. Again, so that means that there's a demonic influence behind the scenes that's anti-Jesus, and that anti-Jesus spirit will attack believers, will attack the church. And so that's why we see the hatred, persecution, is because they hate that spirit, that evil, demonic, antichrist spirit hates Christ and anybody that represents Jesus or represents his truth, the gospel. So it's spiritual warfare 101.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, it because there's all kinds of scientific reports that say that generally Christians are happier.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
So then you go,
yeah.
Why are they mad at him then? Is it because, and there's some theories out there, and I heard one the other day that made some sense in terms of maybe our society now, because God impinges on my freedom to do whatever I want. And some people don't want me telling them what to do, and they don't want you telling them and they certainly don't want God telling them what to do.
Yeah.
So have people bought into a false sense of freedom, which freedom means doing anything you want to do, and perhaps then following a book, and Jesus impinges on that right. I don't know if that's how people set up their rules or not. And I don't even know if that's a legitimate reason why they would be mad at Christians. But maybe it is more just a spirit. I don't know.
It is. It's all spiritual behind the scenes. And now people have their own choices, and people can be angry about things because like I said, people are sinful. So let's just take, so when we talk about spiritual warfare, we're talking about three main things. The Bible speaks, Paul in Ephesians talks about three categories of spiritual warfare, all working together. The world that we live in, the flesh, which is our sin, and Satan. Those three, the trifecta of the world, sin in a person, and the devil, are all conspiring and working together against Jesus. They all make up that front, that axis, if you will, against anything that represents Jesus. And so believers, we're in the crosshairs on that because we represent Christ. Jesus said he came to, in John 10:10, I come to bring life to the full. Well, Jesus wants to bring life. So when you say, hey, statistically, Christians are shown to be people of hope and joy and purpose and all that, like charity, all that. So statistically, just stats show that Christians tend to be not better people. That's not what I'm saying, but people who tend to have that promise of what Jesus said, life to the full, abundant life of joy, peace, purpose. In the same verse, he said, but the devil, Satan, he came to steal, kill, and destroy. So what I think Jesus said in just one verse, John 10:10, is he encapsulated the ultimate warfare that we're in every day, which is Jesus came to bring life. That's what he stands for. It's what he's called us to. Satan has come to bring death. He wants to stand in the way of that. And so we're always in a battle between life in Jesus or what Satan wants to do, steal, kill, and destroy. And he wants to rob us of everything Jesus has. And it doesn't take a gun in somebody's hand to rob people or murder people. You know, when Jesus said to the Pharisees, he said, "You are of your father, the devil." And then he goes, he's the father of lies, and he's a murderer. And so Jesus connected spiritual homicide to lies that we believe. So you can have what we just saw, a tragic shooting, as horrible as that is. What's equally horrible to that are spiritual homicides. And the weapon of choice of Satan is a lie. So, for instance, if Jesus wants us to have peace and hope, Satan wants people to have panic and despair, living in fear. And he will use whatever lie. That is his weapon of choice. And so, of course, we as believers are a threat to him. And so this is all spiritual warfare 101. So behind the scenes, you have people all the time that are being attacked spiritually by the weapon of lies. And then sometimes you see a tragic shooting, and that's just a like really visual manifestation in the physical of what's really taking place behind the scenes spiritually.
It's heavy stuff.
It's real heavy stuff because it's real. I mean, I remember when COVID broke out, and I got a phone call from the Portland Trailblazers because this was right when COVID broke out. I got a phone call pretty quick right away. And they said, Mike, would you be willing to step in? We had someone on staff that just took their life. And this was a person that, man, I saw him running around in the gym and on the court, always smiling. And then in that isolation of during COVID, the isolation just tipped them over the edge. But COVID didn't kill them. The isolation was maybe the final push towards that. But they had been struggling with something inwardly. And then outwardly was just, oh, life is good. But what was happening inwardly was Satan was methodically with this person, lie after lie after lie, hopelessness, 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 despair, despair, despair. And so like that's happening regardless of what we see in a headline with a shooting. That's why I'm saying these spiritual homicides are happening everywhere. But Jesus came to bring life with that. And that's our mission, is to take back what the enemy has stolen, to hold ground. Jesus said he wants to build the church, and he's not talking about a 501c3. He's not talking about a building. He's talking about people who live with hope and purpose and forgiveness. And he said, I'm going to build that, and the gates of hell will not hold back. So Jesus was saying it was his way of throwing the gauntlet down. It was Jesus' way of saying, and the Bible even says that when Jesus did on the cross, he destroyed the works of the enemy. Meaning that what Jesus did on the cross to forgive us, that anybody who receives his forgiveness and believes in him, he brings his life into us and says, now you can have power over the enemy. You don't have to be a victim of the spiritual homicides. You can now have the Spirit of truth giving you life and hope and peace. You don't have to be a victim to what the enemy's doing. So that's why I say everything is spiritual warfare. Everything. It's a battle of life or death, whether there's a gun on a campus or not, although that's horrible. I'm just trying to say that the spiritual warfare is way bigger than just that tragic event.
And as you said, it's not like he didn't tell us it was going to be this way.
Right.
Which is really weird.
Yeah.
To come out and say, if your life's going along pretty good, it's going to get tougher if you come follow me, but it's worth it in the end.
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing for people to swallow.
It is a hard thing. And which is why when Jesus said, pick up your cross daily and follow me, for them, it was literally. I mean, most of them were they all were put to death. And yet, if any of those apostles, disciples were here today, they would say it was so worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it. And that's where the weird thing is, I have met Christians around the world who are in countries that it is bad what is happening to Christians. I mean, it is horrible. And that's all demonic. It's all people that are pawns used by the enemy. But I will also say those people have a faith that I've never even could imagine. I mean, there's a light that they carry. There's a courage. It's like, it is humbling to be in their presence, because they are so willing to say, Jesus is so good. He is such the answer, that in a weird sort of way, they're not saying this, but they're untouchable. They're not saying that. Of course they're hurting. They're weeping. They're grieving over the lost ones who were just in Africa in a church and somebody walked in and killed them all. I mean, these things are happening all over. But their faith has them unstoppable. And that in and of itself is its own supernatural.
Oh, should envy that.
Exactly. Yeah. And then what's crazy is, and we see this historically, where Satan tries to kill the church, it just grows. It just grows. The more Satan tries to persecution, I'll say this the right way, is the best church growth strategy.
Yeah, right.
The more you try to extinguish Christians, the faster it spreads. And Satan just can't win at this dang game that he's trying to win. And I'm not saying he's not taking casualties along the way. I'm not minimizing the people who are living in despair and sadness. What I'm saying is that what Jesus promised, he's going to prevail. And Satan's going to do everything he can. And there are casualties along the way. And it's sad and tragic. And many of us who've had to walk with people where we've seen those casualties of despair and hopelessness. But I say that only to give hope that greater is he who's in us than he who's in the world. And take heart, take courage, the Bible talks about. Don't be surprised, Peter, by the fiery ordeal. And he was speaking of human torches. because that's what Rome did. That's what Nero did. Took Christians and made them human torches and burned them in the arena. And yet Peter says, don't be surprised by the fiery ordeal that you're going through, because Christ went that way. We're called to go that way. He will shine brighter in you. And I mean, it's humbling sitting with people who take their faith so serious. Whereas for us, sometimes in our Western world, it's an inconvenience to go to church on Sunday because there's traffic, and the coffee was not warm to my degree. And I mean, we do that kind of thing. And so when you find someone who's like, yeah, we had to pass through check stops
right.
to go to church, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Or will be killed if they find out we did.
Right. And that's why I have so much tremendous respect when I hear these stories of people, brothers and sisters around the world, who are staying true to Christ in the midst of those kinds of threats. It's they give me faith. They give me courage. I don't know how it all ties back into the shooting, but I think there's layers to it.
Yeah, sure. No, it's good.
So you see things when people attack prayer. It's political, and it's more than that.
Yeah,
there's when people lean into their faith with Christ, and they're criticized for that in times of tragedy, mocked. That's a demonic influence behind the scenes.
Amazing. Before we wrap up, give me a quick update on when does your book come out, the new one?
Oh, that one. In fact, I got to finish the edits this week.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was like soon or.
No, I finished the edits this week. I mean, they've given me all their suggestions. I gotta go through all those, turn them in, and then it's supposed to come out sometime after Christmas.
Did you take my advice on your book cover?
Tried to.
You got voted down?
Maybe.
Gosh, dang it. All right. I'll keep working on him, and we'll see you on the next episode of Vertical Pursuit. Love you. Thanks for listening. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.